wearing a surgical mask, that 3-layer surgical mask, then my chance of transmitting to others reduces by nearly 99%. So that's how effective this mask is for transmitting the disease to others. So when everyone is wearing a mask, then maximum you can maybe transmit 1% of what you have. And also we need to know that the symptomatic patients, those having cough, cold, fever, their viral load is higher than the asymptomatic patient. So there also you're reducing it. And if the doctors, the technicians, the front office are all wearing masks, then that is so much better. What we've done in the last about 15, 20 days is that all of us are now wearing N95 masks. So don't say that. They say for OPD settings, for radiology clinics, departments, use only surgical masks, but we are being over careful. The patients and relatives wear surgical masks, and we are wearing N95 masks. Of course, hand hygiene. No one comes into the center without, sanitizing. Every hourly wiping of the floor with sodium hypochlorite, sanitizing. These are ways in which things have entirely changed. And I can tell you that there is apprehension, tension, which you can feel in the air. And even social distancing is something which we consciously try. But at times, in healthcare settings, it's not possible. But even the way we actually examine the patients, everything is disposable. There is no sheet. It's a disposable sheet that is used. It's a paper sheet thrown after every patient, sanitization done. And so the working has dramatically changed. And what I've realized is not only do we have to do all this, the patient should also realize that you're doing it.
Right.
And then he is that much more comfortable. Thank you.
Right.
I think I took quite a bit of time, but I wanted to put things in perspective.
No, sir, thank you so much. Indeed, these are a lot of anxieties and, from, I think, both the sides, the healthcare provider and the patients. They both are in the same frame of mind, the anxieties. We don't know what are the right protocols. Every day there's some new research being, floated to wear this, not to wear a cloth mask, N95, social distancing. So we are all in, at the, I think we can say the receiving end of information. We'll have to see and judge what is right. So thank you so much, sir. I'm happy to inform that we have over 500 people connected, audience connected to us at the moment. So moving on to Sanjeev, sir. Sir, my question to you is, it's a very interesting mix that I have got my panelists, with Dr. Harsh Mahajan, leading such a big chain of Mahajan Imaging, and you being leading the Pathkind. So quickly, I want to understand how Pathkind is different from the other industry players. What difference you are, your approach, how it is different, and what are the challenges that you faced around the logistics and manpower and shortage of care and ever-changing regulations. So how Pathkind has managed this pandemic so far, and how do you see the future going forward? The future. Over to you.
Oh, that's a hugely loaded question, Nikita. And
I didn't want to waste the time.
So first of all, thanks for the invite once again, and always nice to interact with the colleagues. I hope that everybody's keeping safe, happy, and healthy. I think we are probably in the uncharted terrain, as they say.
Yeah.
Quite unprecedented times. Nobody would have imagined that we're going to face something like this. And as I see that we are traversing a phase in the life where probably nobody knows what to do. And this is one phenomena which is across the globe, fortunately and unfortunately. So while the fact that, even the most developed countries are also facing the same problem, yet we have a problem at hand. And frankly, we are very naive. We don't know how to react to this. And that's the reason why today, in today's times, we have got more questions than answers. And I'll allude to those questions in a bit. But first, coming to your question. So whenever people think about pathology, people think about something which is a back-end work, absolutely back-end. Sorry for using the word, but the shittiest job, because we are, dealing with the stool samples, the blood samples, urine samples, so on and so forth, right? Uh, Now, imagine a country where only 20% people have ever given their blood for testing ever in their lifetime. And I'm not saying, in a year or in 6 months time, ever in their lifetime. Imagine a country where there are about 150,000 labs and only about 11,000 professionals, MD pathologists, MD microbiologists, and MD biochemists all put together. Not even 10% of total number of. Imagine a country where the accession to test ratio from one sample, we carry out at an average little under 2 tests. Now, if we compare this with the Western world, in the US, it goes as high as 15 times. So from one sample, 15 tests are conducted. In NHS in England, the number comes out to be 24. In the developing countries like, let's say, Brazil, this number is again very high. Sorry, about say 7-8 times. So this is the country where we are living in, and only 1% of the labs are accredited. So, there's so many things which are going around in pathology, being a back-end function, yet it has a very, very important role to play. As you are aware, 70% of the clinical decisions are based on pathology. So imagine a doctor or a clinician would not be able to prescribe a test, would not know what the prognosis is until some kind of report, investigation report, whether on the radiology side or on the pathology side, is given to him. Now, another thing which is worth discussing is, in our country, out of those 150 labs that we have, only about 16% labs are in the organized sector, and rest are in the unorganized sector, pop and mom shops. Some are doing good jobs, some are not doing that great a job. But the whole point is that quality is something which has always taken a back seat. And despite the fact we have world's 17% population residing in India, only 1% of the diagnostics infrastructure is available in India. So that is a very, very kind of abysmal or a very sad state of picture that I've presented to you. But I think now the time has come when people are now coming forward to create nice, network of labs. And from where it started was this point. We realized that, out of the total healthcare which is dispensed in the, in our country, while about 69% of the people are residing in, the urban area and in the rural areas, only 37% of the healthcare is available there. So there's a huge gap there. So we thought, first thing first, let's go to the places, let's create the labs where there's a need. We have to be going to the grassroots where people need us. And it was difficult, obviously, because you don't just go in a place like a Mau or a Bahraich or Birzapur, which we have not even heard of, and start setting up a lab, because sending the people who are qualified, sending the MD, first of all, finding an MD pathologist, training those people, finding scientific officers who are qualified people, training them is an ordeal. It's not an easy thing. So what we did was that we set up the labs there. Second thing which was very important to us was to create standardization all across. The major bone of contention used to be that in these places, people don't get the quality work. And doctors, obviously, they're clamoring that, we don't get the right results. We don't know what is happening over there. So we thought, let's standardize everything, right from the equipment to the processes to the IT system. And third thing was that, given the fact that in the urban areas, people still have the paying proclivity, in those small towns, tier 2, tier 3 towns, we don't have the paying propensity. So what we did was, with this thought, we thought, we have to be there in the larger cities, but we can't ignore the smaller cities. And with this thought, this was something which was a little different from what is happening, what was hitherto happening in our country, right? People were mainly, setting up businesses in the larger cities, state capitals at the max. But now we have gone into the tier 3, tier 4 cities also with the labs, not just the collection centers, as you're aware. So this was first thing. Second is how the world has changed over the last few months, or couple of months at least. I think the time has taught us a lot and very fast. I know that while telepathology or teleradiology has been, going on for quite some time now, but the relevance of these things is accentuated all of a sudden. Now, imagine a lab. Imagine a lab where we are. Sorry. Just one sec, please. So, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you try?
Just one second, some problem. Excuse me for this, please. Yeah. So imagine a lab which is in the back of the beyond place, and there, you at times you find the specialists are not there. Let's say if you want to create a slide over there for a patient who's, who's a patient with cancer, how would you really show the slides? You may develop the expertise to create the slides over there, but nowadays we are banking a lot on getting the slides transmitted through the telemedicine or the telepathology. Similarly in hematology. And I think the mere fact that we are today, all of us, I think about 500 plus people are connected through using the technology. I think this is something which is a boon to us. And even in these tough times, we are able to connect with each other and try to give some kind of solutions. Another thing which is very important is that the kind of disease with which we are grappling with. There are 2-3 things in this. One, that this disease is, as I said initially, nobody knows about this. People are very, very skeptical. There are more questions in our mind than the answers. Whether the antibody test, for instance, antibody test would be effective at the first go. Should we be doing the RT-PCR test only? What is it? When do we think the lockdown would continue until what time? Is the virus going to die down in the extreme heat? Are there any vaccines available? What would be the efficacy of the vaccine? If we are already, taken BCG vaccine or a polio vaccine, are we immune to some extent? So these are multiple questions which are going on in mind. Another thing which is happening is people talk a lot about certain therapies. For instance, they talk about the plasma therapy. Is it going to work or not? So I think all this is work in progress for us. As I see, I think there are multiple things which are, being done parallelly. The people who have to come out with the vaccines or the drugs, they are working, really hard to do that stuff. There are alternative therapies which are working. Now, as a pathology company, what we have to do is essentially to create the kind of ecosystem where we are able to bring the samples in an efficacious manner to the place where we can run these samples. Dr. Mahajan very nicely alluded to the point that the business has really come down. Nobody's coming to the hospitals. Not many people are coming to the labs, which is a fact. People are really scared and they think that it's a kind of a lethal virus, and obviously they don't want to get infected by that virus. So even the labs, the pathology lab, while we say it's a recession-proof industry, the testing on the COVID side is increased, yet the other part of the business has come down drastically. Because till the time, let's not forget that about 93% of the business in pathology is B2B. Because unless until a person has a prescription in the hand, generally the patient is not going to come to the lab. So to us, doctor is the one who's sending the patients to the labs. Only 7% people in our country go on their own volition, going for those preventive tests or the or those what we call as the health checkups and all. But by and large, it's a B2B business. So till the time the elective surgeries start, till the time the medical cases other than COVID they come, I think the business is going to remain like this. The challenges which we are facing are on 2-3 fronts. One is, initially, if you remember, we were not aware about the protocols. We were not aware about what kind of kits which are available. We are not really aware about the processes, what to be followed. But gradually, I think I must salute the human spirit. I think we have been able to come together, all of us globally, and have come out with kits faster than anybody else. Actually, who would have imagined that you can churn out kits in no time? So kits are now available, right from the ECR kits to the extraction kits to the VTMs to the your PPs, and everything is now available. Second problem which we are facing even today is the logistics. So imagine a lab which is spread across, say, pan-India basis. We are just 2.5 years old. We even then, I think we are available in about 8 cities, and that too in the remotest of the areas in those states, sorry, 8 states. So if I have to pick up a sample from, let's say, Bhubaneswar or Muzaffarpur in Patna or Gaya in Patna, the sample has to traverse by road. Earlier, we used to ferry it to the closest airport, and from there, we would ferry the samples to our mother lab, National Reference Lab in Gurgaon. But it's not possible now. So even if you're picking the COVID sample, it has to, be picked from a place like, let's say, Bhubaneswar. It takes about 50 to 55 hours to reach Delhi, and you have to maintain the cold chain. You're using dry ice, taking all those precautions. But the problem is that, you are paying top dollars. So here's one test which you have to do your duty bound, because it's national calamity and everybody has to join hands. So at one hand, we're trying to grapple with that. On the other hand, there's a problem of the logistics. The costs have gone up phenomenally. I mean, we don't realize this unless we are facing the problem. The costs have really gone up all of a sudden. Third issue which we face is around the healthcare being state subject. While I think the government is all the governments, I must say, are very proactive. The central government has come out with the promulgation. ICMR is doing a fantastic job. Every now and then they're giving some of the other clarifications to ease our life. Yet to imbibe these things by various states is a challenge. So everybody is trying to reinvent the wheel, trying to do something better than what other states have done. So in that process, what happens is that there's a lot of ambiguity which is surrounding. So it's not just the ominous clouds of COVID, it's also those clouds of ambiguity which are there, all across, and we're trying to grapple with those. So the challenges are going to be there. We understand that this disease is something which is going to remain for some time. We can't just shut our eyes to it. Oh, someday it's going to happen. People have spoken a lot about herd immunity. But the problem here, what we're facing is we're not even certain about herd immunity. Because if the antibody titer is huge enough, yet there's no science or no study to prove that the immunity would develop. So what we're also seeing is that unlike a DNA virus, RNA is very unstable. It's a very, very unstable virus. So what happens is that the virus mutates also. Once it mutates, you don't know what shape it's going to take. So if a vaccine is created for a particular strain, or let's say particular shape of that strain, would it hold good if the virus is mutated? So that's again a big question mark around it. So I think the good thing is, as I said, we all are in the same boat. We all are trying to grapple with this. We all are trying to join hands and fight and combat COVID. Yet there are challenges. We have to be thinking, people. One very good thing which was told to me by a gentleman was that, virus has to thrive on human beings. So virus can't be a lethal virus in that sense. If virus becomes so lethal that it wipes out the entire mankind, then even the virus would not survive. So we have to learn to coexist with the virus. And perhaps now the time has come that we should be thinking out of the box, finding new ways. Perhaps the way we have been lived our life last 40, 50 years.
I think this connection.
We have to, hand hygiene is something which we have to, follow religiously. So all I'm saying is that we don't know what is going to happen. While it sounds very scary, but I'm sure the human spirit, as I said, is such that we are going to live. We're going to be happy again after some time. So.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. I think rightly said, humans are the quick learners and we adapt to our circumstances. So I think the virus should adapt to us now and stop damaging. So interestingly, I was going through, as I said, there are a lot of videos which come by, the different steps being taken by various companies. So there's a video on one of the social media channels, which is going around at one of the manufacturing firm, how it has installed different barriers, handheld, hand pressing devices for the sanitizers, and they've removed all the door knobs and handles from the doors because there's no possibility there. Everybody's like pushing from the elbow, and even some elbow covers are being given, like while exercising one wears. So that kind of things are being given so that one always remembers that you are wearing something. You have to push the door through it. So we are improvising, we are checking. So hopefully we'll get over it. So now coming to Dr. Gaurav. Dr. Gaurav, healthcare at home has always fascinated me, the concept. And it is so interesting. All the blogs that you've been putting, all the research work that, the papers that you have been putting on different channels, and I've been reading it. And honestly speaking, I connect with that, and I understand that healthcare being delivered at home is always much safer. It's cheaper. There are better recovery rates for the patients because they are in their known surroundings. So having said that, but there's always been a little apprehension of patient first approaching not a company, a venture like you, but rather actually going to and getting admitted in an ICU or looking for a hospitalized care. So my question to you is, do you think that post-COVID, this perception there's a change in the perception towards this facility, which is definitely a proven facility services? And secondly, what are the different new initiatives that you are taking in the current situation to service your clients?
Thank you, Nikita. As I earlier also remarked, it's a pleasure to be with the colleagues. I have you, who I've known for years from Fortis Times, Sanjeev sir again from Fortis Times, and Mahajan sir has had a long relationship with my dad. Both of them are radiologists, and now me and Vidur, we are also trying to do something in our lives, right? Having said that, thanks for inviting, and it's a great panel. I have been doing a lot of webinars. I know it's so difficult to get so many people at one point of time. The attention spans are so less. So yeah, things have been very exciting. You have Mahajan sir said that everything got wiped out. We were still lucky. We were lucky because people were forced to be at home. So yes, the revenue dips definitely happen, but they happen to a tune of 25 to 30% for us, right? And yes, the new normal set many new things for us, right? For the first time, the government recognized that this is an industry which is here to stay, and an important part to play in all the things where healthcare will happen. So whenever a MHA guideline was coming, specifically home healthcare got mentioned, whether it was a problem of inter-border or inter-district travel, or getting our deliveries of medicines to patients, or sample collections, as Sanjeev sir was saying, right? So different things happened. It was a very, very, I would say, difficult journey as it was for others. But in our existing services, what happened is that our ICU at home patients increased. Someone asked a question, where did the patient disappear? The patient did not disappear. They could not reach hospital because of the curbs, or there was a fear psychosis where they did not want to go into the hospital. This fear psychosis was so much that they thought that as soon as they enter the hospital, they'll get COVID infected. So that saw a spate of rise in ICU at home cases where we even had difficulty getting people at homes, getting equipment at homes and managing it. But because we were doing it for the last 4 years and we had intensivist on a remote monitoring command center managing it, so we were able to definitely do it. The second problems which also got, we tried to solve was home chemotherapy, adjuvant therapy, and peritoneal dialysis. As the onco centers closed, patients were not being entertained. Initially, the government said, we want all beds for COVID, and all these activities, OPDs, daycare centers, dialysis centers were closed. That is a time where we again jumped into it because we were already doing more than 5,000 patients on peritoneal dialysis per month. We were quickly able to scale that also. And home chemotherapy, which comes from our experience of our promoters in UK, again, we were doing it in bits and pieces, but got much more acceptance and formalized. So this was something which happened in our existing services, the way things happen. At the same time, rehabilitation and physiotherapy completely got wiped off because people took it as a dispensable service and didn't want anybody to come into their home to give them exposure. So these are the two extremes. There were some need-based things which happened. When government said that you could do home quarantine, we got up a program on home quarantine. When government said you could do home isolations, we launched a program of home isolations. And the whole thing was that the government machinery was creaking. to take care of these patients. And we pitched in as private partners to handhold people through these 17 days, where we said that you have doctors on call, you have healthcare workers on call, you have all the education material. We even gave them an app where they could self-report their vitals and their symptoms, and only deviations could be addressed. So people who were mildly symptomatic, pre-symptomatic, were not we know the situation of the quarantine facility and isolation facilities. Now the hospitals are choked in Delhi and Bombay. So this became a very, very easy option where people could convert one room in their home itself into isolation, and still they knew they could speak to a psychological counselor, to a doctor, which meant, and then people who were coming out of the hospitals, where again government said that there is no testing guidelines now. Initially it was 2 tests 24 hours apart, and then they said no, moderate, till moderate, nobody needs it, and you need to isolate yourself again for 7 days. So that's where these things came to. Even whenever these evacuations happened, to the Vande Bharat thing happened, so we even helped hotels to set up their quarantine facilities, because being connected with all the top industry leaders, we were getting a lot of information in the most authentic manner. But the new things which happened was, I think, largely on the telemedicine side. We were doing telemedicine in home ICUs for last 4 years, but still हमेशा मैं सुनता था कि डॉक्टर ये कहता था, यार मैं हाथ लगाए बगैर कैसे दवाई लिख दूं, जब तक मैंने पेशेंट को देखा नहीं मैं कैसे कर दूं. And this changed overnight. And that's where again we launched employee helplines for corporates, where their people were not able to get into hospitals, right? The OPDs were closed, and we saw a lot of traction. I would say we saw almost 5 times traction, where we had a helpline, then we had GPs, and then we had specialists. And because of the new telehealth guidelines, you need to record these all interactions. You need to record all your prescriptions for 5 years. And the doctors, which were simply doing on WhatsApp, when they realized that how are they going to store us, so we had a traffic of doctor and patients both coming to us, which became a win-win situation. To the extent that we were able to do tele-rehabilitation, जो पहले फिजियोथेरेपिस्ट सोचते थे कि होएगा कैसे, आप क्या बात कर रहे हो, हम बिना हाथ लगाए कैसे फिजियोथेरेपी करेंगे. But then when it became a choice of no choice, tele-rehabilitation also started. But I think the most important thing which happened was the awareness. As Sanjeev sir said, it was a pandemic and infodemic. In that, getting the right information, where today you are also getting to your students and your colleagues. At Healthcare at Home, we did a series of 14 webinars from almost all specialities. That did 2 things for us. One, it was authentic information for our patients, and second, for my own employees. There was a huge fear psychosis. We are traveling, we are outside, we are into homes. Agar hame ho gaya, hamari family ko ho gaya, main ghar jaake kya karungi, right? But when the doctors were coming and telling these are the do's, don'ts, it was not a conflict of business. It was not me telling them that I want business from you. It was somebody external, and that reinforced everything, that those universal precautions which we had taught you since ages, you just need to do them even better and stringently. It became as simple as that. But I think one of the things which happened during this pandemic is that we really saw humanity surface. We really saw people, the boundaries between our units. We have units in NCR, Bombay, Bangalore, Kolkata, Chandigarh, and another 70 locations. The boundaries between our delivery business, our hospital at home business, our pharma business, it disappeared. Everybody was that we don't want a single patient to suffer, and we could run all our ICU cases, all our deliveries 24/7. The patients were cooperative, the staff were cooperative. If there was a nurse who could not go from Gurgaon to Noida, we had our sales people coming out voluntarily saying, "Hum yahan se border se pick karenge, sir. We'll pick up from the Gurgaon border, drop at the Noida border, and somebody will again pick up." So that was the way we saw that the teams came up so much together that it was a team. It was fun watching and leading such a team. I'm really proud of my team that we were able to do that. So I think these were exciting times. Revenue bhi kam hua, but some real human stories came out. Some real effort of jisko hum kehte hain patient centricity, caring for patients came out. And yes, the new normal is here to stay. I'm sure people are now going to be more at home. They're looking for treatments more at home. Hospitals, yes, they will always be there. Nobody can replace them, but will be more for acute treatments, more for procedures, which Sanjeev sir has always been telling in the Fortis PNL that let's focus more on the procedures. I think that will become a reality now, right? And most of the other things, whether it is pre-hospitalization, post-hospitalization, telemedicine, and wellness, is definitely going to be something at home. I think we got accredited last year, which also helped us, because when insurances started looking at funding these programs, when they saw, yes, definitely there is affordability, and accessibility which we could bring. Sanjeev sir said कि आप इतनी दूर pathologist नहीं भेज सकते, लेकिन tele pathology कर सकते हो. We were already doing ICUs in various parts of the country where you don't need a physical doctor. So the acceptance to all this came much more, and I think that's going to be the new normal. Also in terms of providing PPEs, sanitizers, how do you start from your home? How do you reach patient home? How do you keep the elderly at the patient home? All those processes were harped upon, and that became the new normal, as Dr. Mahajan was saying, became in the diagnostic centers also. So that's how things have changed for us.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Gaurav. We are loaded with questions and so many of them, but and a lot of them are also not directly relating to the field. People are asking about Ayurveda, how Ayurveda, plant anatomy. So all that is coming. It's difficult for me to scroll through all these questions, but yes, some of them which I have picked up here. Dr. Mahajan, sir, you mentioned that there's a question for you where you mentioned that you started using the mask and then N95, giving it to the patients as well. So, I mean, does it reflect that the cost of treatment will have an impact? I mean, because the use of consumables are increasing, so will the cost of delivery increase?
See, the cost of deliveries is increasing. There's no doubt, because N95 mask from 3M, which we used to buy at 50 rupees, today you can't even get at 500 rupees. So the cost will increase, but I don't think in radiology or in labs the rates have been increased to cover these costs. The rates remain the same.
Right.
And so we are actually absorbing the cost. Right now, actually, the work is so less that, and this will become a new normal. We talk of a new normal. A new normal will also be that people will have less money to spend. It's not only healthcare, but across the board in any field, in any area, people are going to be getting lesser money because businesses across the board are not doing well. And for these 2-3 months of absolute lockdown, it may take years to actually recoup and reach to a level. So it would not even be fair, I would say, to add on costs. In fact, we in the future have to look at newer ways of giving quality at even lower cost. Right now, we all know we are the cheapest in the world. We are 20-25% cheaper than Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Pakistan. And we believe we give better quality in our hospitals, in our labs, in our diagnostic centers. And yet we'll have to find newer ways, better ways of reducing cost. And these add-on stuff that has come, no, we haven't increased our prices, and we don't think we would be increasing our prices. Of course, in the hospitals, where the use of PPE is manifold, for one patient, you may need to use 2-3 PPEs, different people, and these, as you know, most of them are disposable. They are adding on these to the cost. The insurance companies are not covering it. So mostly the patient ends up paying. But I think people are realizing that you cannot at least get a profit on that, because we are hearing that the costs are being jacked up. If you're buying something for 1,000, you're charging 1,500, 1,600. I think that is not fair. We should take it at cost price and bill to the patient in the hospitals, because if a patient stays for 15 days, you may end up using 20, 30 full PPE kits on that. And that's not a cost that can be borne within the regular charges. But I think, again, because paying capacity will go down, we will have to, have a rethink on how to even continue to getting the prices that we were.
I think we have lost Nikita itself. Nikita is not in the background.
So I think Gaurav, you have to moderate the session now. No, I think that's two very interesting point you made, Dr. Mahajan. And I'm sure you would be aware in the initial days when COVID hit our shows, I think there was a huge debate going on as to what should be the price of COVID testing, for instance.
Yes.
And, I think most of us who were involved in the pricing mechanism, setting the price, the thought came to our mind that, we added our costs and a bit of thin margin. We said I think it should be about 6,500 rupees. And when this matter was taken up to the government, they said, look, in 2009, you had done the H1N1 at 4,500 rupees. How is it different? We tried to explain the difference was that that point in time, the dollar was 48 rupees, now it is 76 rupees. But I think the good thing is, and again, I talk about the human spirit. I think everybody has come together. They say, fine, I think this is a national calamity. Not just national, it's a global calamity. Let's collaborate, try to keep down the costs as much as possible. But unfortunately, I quite concur with you. What is happening is the input costs have really gone up dramatically. As a result of which, what is happening is that at one level, you've got a price which is capped for the COVID tests, and all other input costs have gone up. So as such, the sector is coming under huge pressure. I'm only hoping that some sort of respite has to come our way. If something happens to the healthcare delivery mechanism, if it becomes dysfunctional, then there'll be a problem. Sorry,
Right.
Nikita was playing your role. I thought maybe since you had
thank you so much. Some technical error, it had to happen. Okay, so there's a question for Dr. Gaurav. You said that telemedicine has picked up big time. There's a better acceptance of people. The question is, what are the legal aspects that you are struggling with for telemedicine?
No, so there are only, to simplify telemedicine guidelines, there are three things which are most important. One is the consent has to be recorded, even if the government has said that if somebody is seeking telehealth, or we said now we have started saying is digital health standards, right? So if anybody is seeking a doctor's consultation, it is implied, but it's still good for the doctor to have a verbal consent. Whatever is happening has to be on recorded live, right? Whether it's a video or whether it is an audio. And the prescription also has to be either a photograph clicked and stored or a digital prescription preferably. And both these things have to be stored for 5 years with this caveat that they could be retrieved any point of time if there is a lawsuit and the court demands them. So these are the things, major challenges that people don't know this. So Telemedicine Association of India is leading this initiative where they have got a mandate from Niti Aayog to train 5 lakh doctors. Even the Board of Governors have given a new notification in telehealth guidelines that everybody has to do the course of telemedicine, but the time period given for that is 3 years. So I'm not sure when people will start doing it, but there's a capsule course available for only 600 rupees with Telemedicine Association of India, which happens on weekends. And that's where what we tell our doctors to enroll. And further, what we have told people is that you can come to our platform where we are storing things for you under your name, and we are not even charging the doctors for that, right? But that's the easy solution. But our biggest challenge is that people have not read those guidelines and have just started basically doing telemedicine, which might land people into problem. So that's one. I saw another question, Nikita, which I'll answer is that what are the challenges we faced for our employees? I think the biggest challenge which we are facing today is that whenever we go into somebody's home, the people expect our employee to have a COVID negative test, which is very stupid and very illogical, because asymptomatic healthcare worker also is not supposed to have a test. And what is the guarantee that today I do a test and I am negative and tomorrow I will not be positive? So that's one problem I think which I wanted to highlight is very stupid, because people are going on basically asking कि अच्छा आपका nurse आ रहा है, physio आ रहा है, आपका doctor आ रहा है, तो क्या वो negative हैं कि नहीं, right? Another challenge which our employees faced in the early days was that some of them were told that you have to evacuate by their landlords. So there were tenants that said, no, you are going and visiting patients. We don't want you back. We also had challenges, especially in Mumbai, where when we onboarded a patient from the hospital who really wanted to get home, the society said we are not getting patients at home. So these were the very, very different challenges which we addressed. But I think the land of the law supported us in a very big way, and we were able to wade through these things. So that's my response to the question.
Right. There are a lot of questions asking about when COVID-19 will end. So I think
So
no one has
let me
that.
take that. What I
So
can tell you
please.
is that it's not going to end in the short term. The surge will continue. It will get worse. Whether we reach a peak in June or July, actually, no one knows. It all depends on what kind of discipline we follow, whether we wear our masks, whether we infect each other or not. There are so many variables. And so, also about the vaccine, we were talking about herd immunity in the beginning. Now, herd immunity, it's not really known what percentage of problem needs to have immunity for us to get herd immunity. And herd immunity is that, a certain percentage, 70% of your country's population has had the infection, the other 30% are safe because you cannot transmit from one to the other. In COVID-19, we still don't know whether 70 is the number, 80 is the number, 90 is the number. But even if we say 70% is the number, 70% of India is, I think, about 90 crores. And so 90 crore people to have immunity either through infection or through vaccination, it's going to take a long, long time. So we better get used to the idea that this will be there next year also, it will be there in 22 also. Of course, we hope that some good treatment will come so that those who are seriously sick can be treated. And we will also have a vaccine, which may hopefully, if all goes well, we may have by end of the year. Generally, it takes 5 to 10 years to get a vaccine because now the whole world has come together and sharing data that we hope that it will be 12 to 18 months. Even then, to vaccinate 70 crore Indians is going to take a few years. It's not going to happen in 1 year. And then it may be that you vaccinate once and it gives you immunity only for 3 months or 6 months. We don't know. So we may need to vaccinate again and again. So ये जाने नहीं वाला है, ये यही है. And we better get used to it. आप दूसरों को बचाइए, वो आपको बचाएंगे. That is the best thing.
I think just to add to what Dr. Mahajan said, I think it's a very valid point. It's very quite, interestingly explained. See, there are multiple studies which are being carried out concurrently as we are talking. And a few studies state that all would depend upon what kind of immunity we're going to get. Even if by, one is by design by vaccination, second is by the natural process of getting infected and developing those antibodies. So little bit of research that has been done until now, it shows that in one of the research that it is going to last for about 40 days. No, that's nothing actually. If you look at SARS, which was in 2002, the immunity lasted for about 4 to 5 months. That's it. And after that, it started declining over the next 2-3 years. If you talk about MERS, it was there for 34 months. So if somebody has injected the vaccine, that immunity could last for, or even otherwise, the antibodies, the antibodies were developed, it could last only for 34 months, not beyond that. So the point is that we have to learn to live with it. There's no point in fighting this. Maybe we have to adapt. And the only thing which we say, I think, possible in our hand is to adapt. That's the best bet we have as of now.
We have a question, Mahajan sir. Someone is Dr. Vidur's junior. He is asked to convey his regard. Best senior ever, Dr. Vidur. Their comments coming in. So, Sanjeev sir, this question is that the role of paramedic in healthcare, particularly in India. There are a lot of paramedics who have been with us. They are asking that we are willing to help. So actually this question I'll take with 3 of you. The paramedics, they're saying that we are willing to help, but there are none opportunities. So how, do you foresee that, post-COVID, there'll be our need or job opportunities if we are how can we get trained to be useful in this fight COVID? So I'll start with Sanjeev sir, go on to Dr. Gaurav and then Harsh sir.
See, times are tough. But the whole thing is that unlike any other profession or vocation or calling, perhaps the healthcare workers are best poised to land into some kind of a job. If I have to be transactional, if I have to talk about the job market. So to my mind, I think health workers are the best people in today's time. Just that we have to be a little more flexible, a little more malleable. We can't be just sticking to our guns that I can only do X or I can only do Y. We have to learn to adapt to the new environment. We have to learn to acquire those new traits which will make us a better professional. I think even in the professional world, forget about the healthcare, anybody, whether it's a chartered accountant or a doctor or engineer, I think that concept of alternate skills is now coming into being. Other than what I'm used to doing, what else can I do? So that is one. Second is, I think every profession or every calling comes with its sets of risks and challenges. Now, imagine if a phlebotomist says that I can't go because my parents are stopping me to take the swab, then what do you do? And we face these kind of problems because of lack of knowledge or whatever.
Yes.
Okay. If a microbiologist or a molecular diagnostics champion starts saying, look, I can't get into the extraction bit, I can't extract the RNA because I'm highly vulnerable, then there's a problem. I think we have to be more open-minded. Times are going to be tough, let's admit this. But how are we able to prepare ourselves? Dr. Mahajan very eloquently put that, the new normal is going to be very different. We don't know it's going to last until 2021, 2022. We don't know. Maybe there's some divine intervention. I'm hoping for that also to happen because we are God-fearing people in India by and large. So something can happen, but I think we have to be prepared. People have to acquire new skills. People can't latch on to the old skills that they have. They have to be thinking out of the box. They have to become more enterprising. They have to have a global view. And that, I think the noblest thing in our industry, if I'm allowed to call this as industry, is that, we are doing something where there's certain nobility attached to it and getting paid for it. So we don't have to do charity by, taking the monies out of our pocket and going to the temples and the gurdwaras and the mosques. We need not do that. If we are able to alleviate the pain from the face of the patients, we are sorted. So I think we have to now come forward and offer our services to various people who need those. And the market would be there. Let me just tell you, healthcare sector is going to bounce back the fastest, because it's people who are holding on to the healthcare surgeries, they can't till eternity remain in their homes. They have to come out. They have to meet up with the surgeons. So healthcare workers will be back on track the fastest. I think this is what my sense is. And before I conclude, Dr. Mahajan, huge compliments. I think, being the father, you must be a very proud father. What Vidur is doing is excellent. I think I've got huge regard for Vidur myself. So no wonder that this, junior of his is sending his regards to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sir, it seems that Dr. Vidur is leading in the popularity index than you now, taking over.
No, he's artificially intelligent, So he works in the field of AI and molecular, pathology, and these are new fields.
Yes,
and I'll give my thoughts after Gaurav.
Sure. Dr. Gaurav, your point of view.
Yeah, so Nikita, I think Sanjeev sir had said it all. We need warriors at this time. And warriors, if you have chosen to be a healthcare worker at this time, you are a warrior. Now you can't say कि मैं तो field पे नहीं जाऊँगा. As sir said कि मेरे parents बोल रहे हैं नहीं जाना है, तो जब parents infect हो जाएंगे तो उनको कौन treat करेगा? We have faced these problems, but we have been lucky. And across healthcare, I think the frontline workers have not been penalized in any way. Rather, they have been paid more. If at all in a healthcare salary cuts have happened, that has happened on non-clinical staff or at the senior levels. So that's a very good signal that in the most crisis, when you are saying that the economy is crashing and the hospitals are at 30%, right? Still, nobody has laid off nurses. Nobody has laid off doctors, right? So I would rather say that for our industry, we need more people. Where are people? Our problem is that we are not getting people. We have demand. We need the right people with the right aptitude and attitude who can learn and lead from the front. So I don't see that there is any dearth of jobs for people who really want to do the work. Yes, I would say the back-end jobs might be restricted, that people are saying that because of the low workload we'll not do in hiring, but I think that's a very temporary phase. But for people who really want to work, there is a lot of work for them to be done.
Right. Dr. Mahajan, sir?
Yeah, so I take on from where Sanjeev left. You know, we will have to do more than what we are doing today. For any technologist, for any person, be it a doctor, be it a nurse, be it front office staff, we will have to reinvent ourselves. Because, you know, in the short term, maybe in home healthcare, hiring will be there. But in the other space, we don't actually envisage the workloads coming back to pre-COVID levels even in 6 to 9 months' time. It'll take longer than that. So we will, unless we are opening newer centers or newer hospitals, hiring is not going to happen. With the workload being less, the requirement of technologists being lesser, those who know something more, and in the radiology and imaging field, probably people who know informatics, people who can do data entry, people who are very good at the computers. These are skills which will be very, very useful over and above what you're doing today. Because even the way we service the patient is changing. Medicine was all about the human touch, feel, talk, face to face, look at his, share his agony. Unfortunately, till this epidemic gets taken care of, that distance will not get narrowed, it'll have to be widened. And in fact, maybe when someone wants to talk to me about his report, I'll prefer, and he will prefer, that we talk on the phone or do a video chat, which is, you know, we are all so used to doing it now, which seemed, even 3 months ago, it seemed stupid that, you know, Doctor Sahab, aap baithe hain, to main video mein aapse baat karun. But now we'll be forced to do it. In fact, and that's where, you know, these skills, people who know over and above their routine job, it would be much better. Then things like artificial intelligence, you know, we do a lot of work in the field of artificial intelligence. As you know, Nikita, we have CARING, which is the Center for Advanced Research in Imaging, Neuroscience, and Genomics. And these, again, are newer fields. So if you know something more about this, then with your medical background, it's not necessary that someone who has done his, who's become a radiology technician or who's become a pathology technician, he needs to only do that. With that medical knowledge, you can also help in so many other fields. And the other newer fields that are opening up, like genomics, next-gen sequencing, molecular pathology, even digital and remote pathology, you know, teleradiology, telemedicine. These are all areas where, you know, you have an alternative profession that's waiting for you. These are areas that are going up. So if you can reinvent yourself, you will have many takers.
I think also as we go back, I mean, 2004, 2003, when the corporate healthcare started picking up with the new players coming in, I mean, we never had so many healthcare, operations or administration people coming and supporting the CRM or the front office activities. So if we go back to those times, that was a time when all these air hostess academies were just crashing down, and we got them trained. And you know, they were accepted because of their little background in hospitality, and were absorbed really well in healthcare, and they actually have become now the leaders of healthcare patient service excellence and, you know, patient experiences. So I think the same case here with this paramedic question that is being asked. If we train them well, I mean, there's an opportunity to do customized modules for them, train them well, and then there is no, as Dr. Gaurav said and Sir said, that there is no dearth of employment. I mean, we need people to work on this and support us. So I think there's a business opportunity to develop these training programs and get these people trained and, come up and help us. So coming on to, yeah, Dr. Gaurav, please.
Can I ask Dr. Harshak a question?
Please, please.
Yeah, Gaurav.
Harshar, I have been hearing from many of my friends and abroad also that they are doing HRCT for all IPD patients to look for early pneumonias. How has been the trend in your center, sir? Has HRCT gone up? That's my first question. My second question is that teleradiology was already an established fact, right? Did it see a upscale, and how you see the future of teleradiology? These are my two questions.
Yeah. So to answer your first question, CT is very, very useful in COVID-19 because it's able to pick up lung lesions very well. And actually in China, in the early days, in January, February, they actually used CT to diagnose COVID-19 because it has very specific, location and look. And that's how now AI algorithms are being built. In fact, we are building one also for this. But that was because RT-PCR reports were taking 6 days in China, in Wuhan at that time. But the moment RT-PCR became available in larger numbers, end February, the guidelines came that CT is no longer to be used for, diagnosis of COVID-19. Also, let me tell you that there are papers, we published a meta-analysis of 49 papers on CT chest only recently. And in that, 34% false positives were seen. Something called COVID, but is not COVID. 34% false positives. So I don't think anywhere in the world, your colleagues also, friends, may have used it for some time. But currently, it's not to diagnose, and that is what we follow in this country. And it is when a patient clinically needs a CT. You need to see the extent of disease, you need to see whether it's improving or not, you need to see whether there's any pulmonary thromboembolism, whether, in fact, based on CT, they even started, whether the patient will be supine, prone, right lateral, left lateral, those kind of things. So it's only to answer a specific question that CT is to be used. It's not for a diagnosis, and anyone who says anything to the contrary is wrong. All the guidelines that have come from the Fleischner Society or Indian Radiology Association, RSNA, ECR, all of them are very clear on this. So it's not to be used for that, but in an exceptional case, for problem solving, you may use it. But there again, you have to remember, you have to be very, very careful. It takes nearly 45 minutes to, sanitize the CT room and the CT machine after you've taken a COVID patient. So in COVID hospitals, where they have 2 CT scanners, they actually reserve one for the COVID patient and one for non-COVID patient, because you do not want to end up, spreading the disease to non-COVID patients. And the radiology department can really become a source of this spread, because we cannot do without air conditioning. It has to be there. In the beginning, they were not wearing masks. And so even in Mumbai, in many of the hospitals, the spread happened because of this. Even radiology technicians got affected.
Right. Actually, this is right, sir. So actually, this is also a concern. I think his connection.
It's fine. We can hear you. Go on.
We can hear you now.
So okay. So I think that is also a concern, that optimum utilization of resources is going to be one challenge that we'll have to deal with. Disinfection of equipments, and then getting ready for the next patient. And how many of the hospitals have 2 CTs and 2 MRs to handle? I mean, maybe is going to change. There was a, as you rightly said, that we'll have to learn the new ways of it. So there was a webinar on nursing. So it's like relearning of the protocols for the nursing also. Now that's also a big challenge. It was difficult to train them. Now to relearn is again something. Sanjeev sir, last I think we are at 10 minutes.
One little word, Nikita, is regarding the fact that pretty early on, the government of India took advice of the healthcare professionals and decided that there will be dedicated COVID hospitals. In the beginning, the thought process was we will take 15, 20 beds in every hospital and designate them as COVID beds. Whereas when, I'm the vice president of Nat Health, I am the co-chair of the FICCI Healthcare Committee, CII, everyone along with government, when we interacted Niti Aayog, they agreed that there should be dedicated COVID hospitals, or there should be COVID wards in large hospitals which have absolutely independent, air conditioning, independent entry and exit. And because of that, I think the cross infection to the patients has been very, very less because of this.
Absolutely, you're right, sir. I mean, I think the hospitals will also have to look into their infrastructural changes post once we are a little over with this. Sanjeev sir, there's one question. I think we're at 5:15 now. We'll try and wrap up. There's one question which is coming, is asking that how do you see a strategic role of private labs in treating patients at government hospitals, with the fact that the government has now announced there's going to be a lab in every ward? So how do you see any connect? And of course, the role of Pathkind, because you've been into tier 2 cities and a little remote areas.
I think it's a very welcoming kind of a thought process. And in my previous avatar, we were the first ones to get into 3 PPPs, public-private partnerships. For the first time, it happened in the pathology space, where we collaborated with 3 state governments. And what we could create was something nice, something which one could be proud of. Now the time has come that we have to look at collaborations of this sort. And I'll try to answer this question at a little macro level. So imagine there are assets with the government. Let's talk about hospitals to begin with, which were created, let's say 20, 30, 40 years back. They have maybe not doing too well because of the fact that maybe needing some repairs, maintenance. These are not maintained properly. If they run nicely, they are maintained nicely, then perhaps the equipment has become obsolete. If the equipment is there, perhaps there's a dearth of doctors and the healthcare workers. If that is also there, probably the doctors and the health workers not coming there for whatever reason. Okay, now it makes perfect sense to involve the private sector. In our country, as we know, most of the healthcare is dispensed in the unorganized sector. To the extent of about 70-75% is in the private hands as is. Though the assets, there are huge amount of assets. If you talk about the IPD assets, to the best of my understanding, about 60-65% of the assets are with the government. Now, if the collaboration, the marriage of both the sides happens, I think that will be a fantastic thing. The problem is in the kind of trust deficit which is there today. Despite the fact, and believe me, I can only go by my experience, I have seen some very, very passionate people in the private sector who are running healthcare. My career with the healthcare industry is now almost about 15 years, right? And during this tenure of 15 years, I've seen some people who are very committed, highly committed. But somehow, that trust deficit is always there. Somehow I feel that has to go away. While we are very happy to collaborate, I think there have to be certain workable models. I remember about 10 years back, we were sitting in the planning commission through CII, and we were trying to develop some models under PPP with the government. While center agreed, but healthcare being a state subject, it took a backseat because everybody was trying to reinvent the wheel, which is so. The point is not around whether we like it or we can do it. We certainly can do it. There's a will from the private sector side. How do we structure it? what kind of models can we create to ensure that, so see, we have to understand one thing I think most of you would be knowing. If somebody goes to a government hospital and says that, look, my test is being done for free or I'm treating for free, nothing comes free of charge. It's the taxpayers' money. What we have to see is whether the same thing, same healthcare is dispensed in the most cost-effective manner or the efficient manner in which of the facilities, government or the otherwise. If the cost of treating the patient is more in government, then perhaps we have to look at alternative means. So all I'm saying is people have to collaborate. The government, the private and the public sector have to come together, use each other's strengths. I think the decision making certainly is faster in government and in the private sector. If we are able to create some kind of model, certain governments are already running certain models which are highly effective. So we are very open. We are as such going out, walking that extra mile to collaborate with the governments. We have done that in various places and we'll continue to do that. It's a good idea actually. Just that we need to give it a shape, a proper shape.
Right. Thank you, sir. And since we are heading towards the time now, closing remarks from Dr. Gaurav, Dr. Harsh, and then Sanjeev sir. Anything that you like to conclude?
Nothing, I think that was quite informative and quite a good discussion. And my closing remark or message, whatever, that this is a new normal. As Sanjeev sir said, we have to cohabit with the virus. Virus can't survive without us, but we have to learn to survive in this new normal with the virus. So we all should be geared up for that.
Right.
Yeah, so the youngsters who are there and who want to make a career in the healthcare industry, I would say that, you are much, much better off than your peers. Those who went into other fields will have much more to fear. Just think of aviation, think of tourism, think of, the hospitality industry. Those will take much longer. As Sanjeev said, hopefully healthcare industry will have a V-shaped curve and will bounce back very fast. And so what I would say that all of you, who are still studying or, very young, try to get engaged with the digital world. I know you already are, but the digital world is the future. And if you are familiar with that, then you will fit in any facet of healthcare very, very well. And also, whether it's a new normal or a new abnormal, we have to live with it. And we should not fear it. In any case, all of you are young, below 50 years of age, वो पता भी नहीं चलता है कि बीमारी आई कि नहीं आई, but still you may be an asymptomatic carrier. So please wear your mask. That will save your family from you. That will save your parents. That will save your colleagues. That will save your teachers. And, make the best of it. The healthcare industry right now is very badly affected. Will take some time coming back, but hopefully will continue to thrive in the future. And so you will thrive.
Thank you so much, sir. Sanjeev sir, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Nikita, once again. It was fantastic to be on this panel along with Dr. Harsh Mahajan and also with Gaurav. So see, my heart goes out to the youngsters, especially the ones who are in the last year or they've just passed out and they've just taken up a job. Let me just tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, youngsters there, that you have been baptized by fire, as we say. Now, once you cross this stage, believe me, nothing is going to be insurmountable for you. So that's the positive side of it. I think you are fortunate in a way that, you are able to kind of see this kind of a thing, which probably, at least I would not have imagined even 4 or 5 months ago in this kind of situation. So I think the new doors would open, the new avenues would open. Just be positive. Nothing is permanent. If I'm allowed some bit of philosophy or being a little philosophical, I think, as a human race, we are quite resilient. We bounce back. And this will be a good good repertoire in your arsenal, a good kind of a, arrows in your tools in your arsenal when you go out. And I'm sure we will be able to overcome this time. Being from the healthcare industry, I think the onus is on you, not just to take good care of yourself, but try and disseminate the knowledge which you have acquired all these years, last 4 or 5 years, during your study curriculum, and even your interaction with the colleagues and people in the fraternity. Just try and see how you are able to contribute even while you're not driving the vehicle. Being a backseat driver, if you're able to contribute a bit, please do that. Stay safe, be happy, and I'm sure you're going to bounce back. All the very best to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harsh Mahajan, Sanjeev sir, and Dr. Gaurav. I think we have a very, very active audience. Sanjeev sir just mentioned the word baptized by fire, and they're like, I can see 10 messages. Absolutely, Sirji, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, we are lucky to have such a great audience. And thank you so much once again. And for sir, you and the audience, I'd like to inform that on 2nd of June, I'm organizing another session, and with the mentor that many of us has, Dr. Narottam Puri, sir would be chairing the session, along with Dr. Atul Kochar, who's the CEO of NABH, and Ms. Shobha Mishra from FICCI. So the discussion, which I have graded it as Healthcare 2.0 version, that what are we seeing, how NABH is planning to contribute, what is FICCI doing, and Dr. Puri being at the helm of things, what does he, how does he look at the industry, and what are the future new things that we are looking at. So 2nd June, we have planned this event. I shall definitely send all of you the invite. So do join in if you can spare some time. And also for the audience, we'll post this new webinar for 2nd June on different channels. So please, you're more than welcome to join us. And thank you so much once again, Dr. Mahajan, Sanjeev sir, and Dr. Gaurav. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're really nice.
You're doing a
Thanks
great
a lot.
job. All the best.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye, Gaurav. Bye, Dr. Mahajan.
Bye, bye-bye. Bye, Sanjeev. Bye, Gaurav. Bye, Nikita.
Thank you.